If we choose cremation, it's our choice, not his. It's an act of pride. And after our whole life of humility and service, why would we want our last act on earth to be an act of pride?
Did years burn up those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind comprehend and ask if you'd last till the end?
Perhaps the easiest thing to compare it to today that I think most people have heard of is green burial. Green burial has come about as a formerly New Age. I don't even know what age we're in now. That was a couple of decades ago, I guess, was New Age, when green burial came about from environmental concerns. The whole idea that in putting chemicals in the ground, much less the body, but putting chemicals in the ground was not a really good idea, and obviously it's not. It's also known as natural burial. But it's the way human beings have buried one another from time immemorial, from the very beginning. Even Neanderthals buried their dead. Anthropologists have uncovered Neanderthal burials that were obviously ceremonial. They were laid on grass mats. Different flowers and herbs and different items were put in the grave with them. So it goes all the way back to the dawn of man, natural burial. What we have come to know in America as our traditional form of burial here is an anomaly. It is chemical embalming. Chemical embalming was only invented during the Civil War as a means to get officers from the battlefield back home to be buried. A Union Army doctor invented a way with several chemicals to preserve a body longer, and decade or so after the war, formaldehyde was invented, and that really kicked off chemical embalming. The interesting thing about that is that around the turn of the 20th century, the early 1900s, refrigeration was invented. And refrigeration made embalming obsolete. So why do we still have embalming? The reason we still have embalming today is because embalming is what makes the funeral industry necessary. You have to have a license to embalm. Anyone can refrigerate. And that's what we do. Now, a body will keep perfectly well at room temperature for 24 to 48 hours, depending on what the room temperature is. It obviously varies from location to location. And we simply use dry ice, handled properly, and in a wooden box, and that is the mode of refrigeration. As I mentioned, Archbishop Dimitri lay on dry ice for 5 days in Dallas, and you never would have known it, because he wasn't frozen, there was no frost, there was no fog, which is what everyone associates with dry ice. If you handle it properly, these things don't happen. Why is it important? That comes back to one of my pet peeves or pet subjects, which I believe that virtually all of the problems that we're dealing with today are simply a misunderstanding of anthropology. And there are no different kinds of anthropology. There's not a secular anthropology and a Jewish anthropology and a Christian anthropology. There's only one. What does it mean to be a human being? And if we really understood what it means to be a human being, we wouldn't be doing all the things we do to one another. The human being is absolutely the most precious thing in the universe, to the Creator. He created everything, and his last ultimate creation was man. Man was created to live with God in an intimate relationship that we can't even fathom. It just blows your mind to even try to think about it. It's an ultimately intimate relationship. I love the line in Genesis where he breathed life into man's nostrils. That's a pretty intimate picture. But even that doesn't come close to the intimate relationship we're created to have with God. He created every one of us for that ultimately intimate relationship in love. As Christians, and that's all human beings. As Christians, we call ourselves the body of Christ. Well, how are you going to treat Christ's body? You know, if Christ were here, or if you were there, would you just throw it in the dung heap? Would you burn Christ's body? Would you pump it full of chemicals and prop it up in the corner so you could keep it forever? You know, Christ was embalmed. He was properly embalmed. What the myrrh bearers brought to Christ's grave was balms, and he was properly embalmed. There is a difference between embalming and chemical embalming, which is what we do today. It's really an abomination. My intuition as a very young child was correct. It's completely wrong. And Christians really need to get away from this whole idea of embalming. And cremation is even worse. Shall I go on, or? Where embalming makes an idol of the body. It says, okay, we're going to take Grandma, we're going to pump her full of chemicals, and we're going to keep her for several days. It's unnecessary, one, but it's almost this is the type of embalming that the Egyptians did for completely pagan reasons, so that the Pharaoh or whoever would have his body in the next life. Well, we know better than that. We'll have our bodies back, but they will be perfected. We don't need chemicals for that. Cremation, on the other hand, just turns it into a waste product. Let's just burn them. Cremation is one of the things that really made the Romans hate Christians very early on, at the very beginning of Christianity. You know, the Romans, they had their pagan mythology, but they were all pretty loosey-goosey about it. They'd accept anybody's religion pretty much. They didn't really believe their own. Most of the people didn't even believe in their own gods. But Christians would refuse to cremate Christians. And it infuriated the Romans, because it was, to them, it was heresy that they wouldn't cremate. And that's how important it was to the early Christians. Human beings, there's a lot of talk these days about, because of our ability to keep bodies viable, keep people alive, and transplants and all of the things, all the technology that we have today, there's a good bit of speculation and talk about personhood. When is personhood endowed? Is it in the womb, or when does that happen? And when it comes to the end of life, when does a person cease to be a person, and all of these things? Well, we're pretty clear on that. Personhood is not found in the soul or the spirit. It's not found in the body. Personhood is a unique combination of a soul and a body handcrafted by God for each one of us. You know, whether you're a young, strong athlete or a disabled person like my friend with spina bifida. We are endowed by our Creator with a body and a soul that are so closely united that is what makes death so difficult for us. Death is not part of God's plan. And therefore it's not natural. God never wanted us to experience death. We chose it. We chose to marry ourselves to food and clothing and shelter instead of to Him. And the consequence of that is death. And what makes death so difficult is the wrenching of the soul from the body. That we're so closely, that is our person. It's not one or the other, it's the whole thing. That's what makes burial so important, is the value of the human body. Each one of us is created for an ultimately intimate relationship with God. Each one of us is a person, loved by God, His beloved. Each one of us is ultimate, infinite value to God. And we can, we spend our whole lives trying to attain to humility. We place ourselves in God's hands, praying for Him to guide us and care for us. And we try to be good servants all of our lives. And then we come right to the end, and we can continue to place ourselves in God's hands, into the earth from which we were made. And who knows, maybe future generations will have your relics to venerate. Maybe not. But that's His choice, not ours. If we choose cremation and some of the other things that are out there now, if we choose cremation, it's our choice, not His. It's an act of pride. And after our whole life of humility and service, why would we want our last act on earth to be an act of pride?
Did years burn out those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind comprehend and ask if you'd last till the end? Traded money and lands, family dreams and plans, for a desert exile and a life of trial.